Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started now. I want to say hi to everyone and thanks for joining us today for our session, Deep Engagement at Scale, Organizing Through Mobile First Messaging. Josh, would you go to the next slide for me? My name is Shatisha Bagford Young. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am a digital organizer with For Our Future Ohio. I previously worked with the Ohio affiliates of URGE, NARAL, and Planned Parenthood, and have worked in public libraries for coming up on 7 years now. And just a little shout out, if you don't have a library card at your local library, now is a great time to get one. Josh, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Josh Merritt. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a digital organizer with For Future Ohio, where I help develop and execute digital media strategies around issues and elections. I also hold a BA in communication with a focus on human-computer interaction from The Ohio State University. I've also been a practicing glassblower for over 11 years, operate my own studio, and have traveled the globe to advance as an artist. Recently, I've been working on using automation and chatbots to develop more robust voter engagement efforts, and I look forward to talking with you all more about that today.
Awesome, thanks, Josh. And what is For Our Future Ohio? So For Our Future Ohio is a statewide coalition organization that seeks to build progressive power through voter engagement, community organizing, to strengthen public education, create shared economic prosperity, advance social and racial justice, and preserve the environment. And as digital organizers at For Our Future Ohio, we execute paid and organic digital organizing and organize communities online. And during the age of COVID, applying field and in-person organizing to digital tactics has just become all the more important. Josh, would you go to the next slide for me? So just a quick rundown of what we'll be going over today. Firstly, we're going to talk about what is mobile first messaging, then we'll move into why we at For Our Future have started using mobile first messaging in our program. Then we'll touch on how COVID has changed how we organize. And then we'll explore why you and your organization might want to use a chatbot and go through an example of chatbot flow. Then we'll explore some of the other options out there before detailing the innovation and iteration process for you all. And then closing out with some examples before we turn to our Q&A session. And as we're going through our session today, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and we'll make sure to get to them before our session wraps today. Josh, would you go to the next slide for me? Awesome. So what exactly is mobile first messaging? Mobile first messaging, not to be confused with mobile responsive, is a broad design and communication strategy that arose in the early 2000s. It's become more popular with marketers and organizations as cell phones have just become more naturally widely available and utilized amongst the general public. Specifically, mobile first messaging prioritizes mobile phone users over the traditional web browser or desktop computer user. I'm sure we've all been on a website at some point on our phones that was really difficult to navigate or interact with. Maybe you couldn't click the buttons, or maybe you struggled to click the buttons because they were too small for the screen that they were being displayed on. This is often because that website owner took their desktop website and simply scaled it down to fit on cell phone screens without any other content or layout changes. And mobile first tends to avoid that by designing the experience from the offset for cell phone users, and then scaling up for larger and larger screens and making those necessary changes and adjustments along the way. Additionally, mobile first messaging can be seen as the modernization of, but absolutely not the replacement of, traditional field organizing tactics such as one-to-ones, in-person, canvassing campaigns, etc., and then applying that to the digital world via things like chatbots, social media apps, and Facebook ads, and so on. As we all know, the average voter is a very busy person who, between work, children, and any other varied combination of responsibilities, might not necessarily be able to sit down for a one-on-one with you, and they also might not be home during traditional door knocking hours. But they do almost always have their cell phones with them, which means they can be sent an SMS containing a link to our mobile-minded website. It can be served a Facebook ad that's been targeted at mobile users, and they can also consume other forms of content like our YouTube videos. And adopting mobile-first messaging in this scenario just opens up a brand new accessible path for voter engagement. And perhaps most importantly, adopting mobile-first messaging allows orgs to plan and develop those sustainable ways to engage with the audience at that organization's individual capacity. Josh, you can go to the next slide. And so what exactly are people doing on their phones right now? Well, according to a report from We Are Social in about January of 2020, months before COVID forced us to quarantine and absolutely overhauled the landscape of organizing, about 89% of users aged 16 to 64 were mainly using messaging and social media apps such as Facebook, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, TikTok, so on, closely followed by video shopping and map apps like YouTube, Netflix, Google Maps, and so forth. And while COVID has obviously and very clearly changed how we're interacting with each other face-to-face, this has only increased our reliance on our mobile devices for social interactions and distractions, as we'll discuss a little later. Can you go to the next slide for me? And so why has For Our Future Ohio pivoted to using this mobile-first messaging? Well, according to a recent study by Pew Research, about roughly 1 in 5 American adults are smartphone-only internet users, meaning that for whatever reason, they don't rely on broadband access at home. This is especially common amongst younger adults, non-whites, and lower-income folks. And additionally, lower-income and rural voters are more likely to have access to a mobile device that has data on it than they are a traditional desktop computer that has reliable broadband connection. And another recent study from both Pew Research and Statista has shown that the number of voters accessing the internet solely via their mobile devices has gone up considerably, even since the beginning of 2019. And as you can see by the chart on the screen, mobile phone usage has just steadily increased as time has gone on. And based on this, we can predict that it will continue to grow. The data also suggests that while mobile messaging is the preferred way to communicate amongst millennials and even younger generations, this is also starting to be really true for older age groups as well. Again, according to Pew Research, in 2019, the number of adults aged 30 to 49 who relied on smartphones was just 4% below their younger counterparts. And so we like to think that there's a great digital divide between millennials and older generations, but it's not nearly as wide a gap as most people believe. And again, it's just something that we're noticing that gap is shrinking and shrinking as time goes on. And likely as a result of this growing number of mobile phone users, mobile devices have quickly become the top source of social media site visits. Josh, if you'd go to the next slide for me. And so how has COVID changed how For Our Future organizes? Firstly, we've had to majorly readjust our expectations of door knocking campaigns and have instead supplemented them with things like SMS campaigns, phone banking, and chatbot campaigns. This has allowed us to maintain that crucial contact with those same voters we'd otherwise be trying to reach on their doors, but in a way that, in the middle of a pandemic, allows our team members to remain safe as well as us not endangering our audience. We've also optimized paid ads for the mobile experience. So when I started as a digital organizer, I wasn't using mobile-first messaging, and so I was developing pieces of content and ads that were not optimized for mobile phone users. So whether that meant that the video that I'd made didn't play quite how I envisioned, or maybe they had to scroll to be able to see all of the graphic that I had made. Just envisioning what that experience is going to be like for the mobile users from the outset. We've also began targeting mobile users for our ads, and this is something that Josh will touch on a little bit later, but we found that our mobile users are more responsive to ads than typical desktop users. We've also increased our social media presence using mobile-minded platform tools like Instagram and Facebook stories, as well as developing content like graphics and videos, again, with that same mobile platform in mind. And again, that's just keeping things in perspective, such as the dimensions of what you're making, the file type, how long is the text that's associated with it, so on and so forth. And also, mobile first just doesn't mean mobile only. We're not trying to focus on one group of voters just to essentially ignore another. We don't want to sort of alienate our base that might not necessarily be comfortable using mobile devices and might not necessarily be as much on social media. And so in a post-COVID world, ideally, we'd also be talking to these target audiences in face-to-face settings, whether that's being at community events, rallies, door-to-door canvassing, so on. While mobile-first tactics are a great way to engage with people and drive actions, it's not the only way we should be talking to people. But in this situation, it is one of the safest ways we can engage. And Josh, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Satisha, and hello, everyone. As I'm sure you all know, it's been a challenging year to communicate with the people we need to. So like many organizations, we've had to work on unique approaches to reach our audience where they are. And our data shows us they're mostly on their mobile devices. One of the ways we've achieved a deeper level of engagement with our audience is the use of chatbots. That's because it's more important than ever to effectively connect with people digitally. The key word there is effectively. The key to continued and meaningful engagement is making your content personal and user-friendly. And that's where a well-designed chatbot can shine. Chatbots don't have to be impersonal or robotic. Essentially, they make the difference between sending messages to someone and having a conversation with someone. So chatbots are a great way to engage with your audience, reach out to voters, recruit volunteers. It's kind of like a pick your own adventure that can help move users up the ladder of engagement. A good way to use a chatbot is first and foremost developing it with mobile users in mind. As we'll show with a look at our campaign results later in this training, users mostly engage with their mobile devices. It's best not to try and fool the user into thinking they're talking to a real person. Instead, offer some kind of utility, service, or information that can satisfy the user's needs and your engagement goals. With some proper setup on the front end of your campaign, you can achieve a deeper level of engagement with a growing number of people at a rate well beyond your personal capacity. And by automating some or all of the data entry, you're freeing yourself up to work on more creative ways to engage your mobile audience across platforms. And that's ultimately the goal of using these platforms, is to automate what you can to reach the people you need to when you need to. So what does a chatbot look like? We're deploying ours through Facebook Messenger. Our users see a chat message like they're talking to a regular person, but the messages are sent by an automated system. Let's take a look at what's actually happening behind the scenes. This is an example of what a flow can look like, which is the chatbot sequence, and we'll take a closer look at that in a moment. We built this flow using MiniChat. This is actually the flow from one of our recent ad campaigns, which we're going to talk about here. As you can see, there are a number of options, and we'll go over some of the possibilities later in the training. But essentially, flows can be simple or complex. But the important thing is that they meet your goals, not just for your current campaign, but for your future ones. So let's take a closer look at this flow from the beginning. We open with a message asking them to take an action in our campaign. If they answer yes, they're taken to the next segment, which captures their contact information. It also marks them as someone who we got to commit to our action, which we'll then follow up on during this or later campaigns. All of that data is sent automatically to our Google Sheets contact list, which is one of a number of great possible ways to integrate things into your flow and build flows into your overall campaign strategy. We'll talk more about that later. So the data entry happens on the back end in milliseconds, but the user just sees the next message, which asks them to follow up on their commitment by actually clicking our link. This multi-channel engagement strategy has been successful in creating a more complete user profile. As you know, sometimes users fail to give you the information you need, like committing to be a volunteer and not actually giving you their contact information, for example. We've had that happen a few times during this campaign, but our multi-channel engagement strategy helped us fill in the gaps. And this is a great reason why you should have a layered engagement approach to meet your campaign goals. It leads to a deeper engagement at scale and better digital organizing outcomes. So let's take a look at the data from this campaign. What were our results? Firstly, these ads were set to run all the time on Facebook news feeds, Marketplace, Stories, and Messenger Stories, with campaign budget optimization set to off over a period of 15 days. So this data reflects where our audience actually received and engaged with our ads. On desktop, our ads were only seen by 1.6% of our total reach, or the individual people who saw the ad. But mobile accounted for 98.4% of our total reach. We also had 214 messaging conversations that happened on mobile, compared to only one on desktop. So we started 215 conversations with people on Facebook Messenger with our mobilization universe and got commitments to take our requested action and even volunteer, all without direct action on our part once the ads were up and running. That's a clear benefit for organizations of any capacity. What's also clear from this and our other campaigns this year is that our audience engages with us mostly through Facebook and on mobile devices. And this also further supports the importance of developing for mobile first. So that's one example of how chatbots can be effective. But what else can we do to achieve deeper engagement with our audience? Firstly, I can't overstate the ways Google Sheets allows you to expand on your programs. The formulas, conditional formatting, and external integrations, to name a few, open up a whole new world of possibilities. Managing data and different programs can be cumbersome and eats up your capacity, particularly with scaling campaigns and large engagement lists. So effectively integrating these platforms with each other and eliminating manual tasks on your end is critical. And also integrations between platforms open up new possibilities for deeper engagement with your audience. For example, you could automatically fill out contact information if you have it on file already and just skip the intake step. Or by removing action steps the user has already taken, you can provide a cleaner user experience. We know users will drop off our engagement funnels at an increasing rate the more steps they have to take. This is particularly true for mobile users where we only have a brief moment to hold their attention and a smooth user experience is critical. So it's important to remove obstacles when possible. So before we go over some examples, I'll first point out that chatbots aren't limited to just Facebook Messenger. The available channels for ManyChat, the platform we use, also include SMS and email. You can embed these flows into your websites, Facebook pages, Facebook ads, a QR code, or just get a link you can use in any way you want. So let's go over some practical examples of what you could do with a chatbot. A lot is possible and with some creative implementation. You can develop a flow that gives the users directions to a location by sending them an address. The address is recognized by most apps and shows up as a clickable link on mobile. You could also use this kind of flow to send people to their polling location, or a ballot drop-off box, or resources for COVID-19 relief like food banks and testing sites. Alternatively, you could create a flow that works like a click-to-call campaign to get your users to call you or another person, or perhaps an elected official. Just add a button to call the number and the user will be sent to the dialer on their phone. Or you could direct users to a website for any reason, like generating ads or generating leads, increasing traffic, fundraising, or petition drives. Finally, you can send people the information they need to vote by mail. It's possible to give individualized information based on the user's zip code. We expect voting by mail to be crucially important this year, and a self-service information hub would help users tremendously. When talking about what's actually on the ballot, people don't usually know much about down-ballot candidates or specific issues. But with your help, they can have the information they need at the tap of a finger. The point is, you can use this in many ways and for many reasons, and we can only give you a sliver of the possibilities here. So it's up to you to innovate. So let's talk about innovation and iteration. Whatever conversation flow you decide to create, it's important to keep in mind that innovation and iteration are crucial to success. It's essential to be constantly thinking about how to improve your chatbot flows, or really any engagement method, while taking in the lessons along the way. Chatbots, for example, are typically written in a very linear way. The user goes through from start to finish, and that's it. But by adding something as seemingly simple as a back button to the flow, you could get a lot more life out of the chatbot. A simple back button takes the user to the previous step or to the beginning of your flow, and will help you get more of the precious engagement time from mobile users, as well as better meeting the user's needs. It also allows you to add in more options for dialogue, actions, or information to the same engagement funnel. That's one thing you could change and see dramatically different results and hopefully a higher return on investment from your campaign. Lastly, it's important to test things before and after you implement something new. Don't be afraid to try new things out. And make sure to study your previous flows for what you can improve on. We think iteration is really valuable for chatbot flows. There will always be a new feature, rule change, or contact method around the corner, new contact method. Reevaluating how you can improve on flows in steps will make your overall campaign that much stronger every time. So innovation is how we excel in this field. For our last topic, we're going to talk briefly about what to do after you first make contact with a new user. But first, I'll ask a question. Can you keep unique details about over 100,000 or more people in your head and bring them up in conversations at a moment's notice? The answer is probably not. But a well-designed chatbot that's integrated into all parts of your program can. That's the kind of deep and sustained engagement at scale that organizations need and users appreciate. Users appreciate being recognized for previous engagement and followed up with about issues important to them. You can virtually knock on tens of thousands of doors per week. Mention people by name and increase the quality of engagement with them. Depending on their relationship with your organization, deepening the relationship with your organization and mobilizing them to participate and grow your campaigns. You can even ask people to share your content with their friends, giving you some added organic reach on top of your campaigns and possibly leads with hard to reach areas. You can even set up alerts so that your staff can follow up with new leads and make those personal connections with a warm audience. Rather than chasing down cold leads from a contact list of people who gave you their information that one time at that one place for some reason. You remember, right? The only limit there is really the size of your contact list and your budget. And the benefits to using automated services to improve your engagement can be exponential. So keep these things in mind when designing your mobile-first campaigns, and also consider your plan for sustained engagement and long-term engagement with users. And now I'm going to bring Shatisha back in to give some closing remarks before we take questions. Shatisha?
Thanks, Josh. So if you only take away a few points or concepts from this session, it should hopefully be these. that mobile-first messaging and strategy is crucial for reaching voters that increasingly rely on their phones for internet access. The added benefit here is that we're also reaching voters that otherwise may be hard to reach via those traditional field tactics, or who may otherwise just be overlooked, such as rural and low-income voters. And instead, we're meeting them on their digital doorstep. Also, chatbots can help organizations of all sizes create sustainable conversations with those same voters on a variety of different issues, and can substitute some of those conversations that would otherwise be happening in person at doors or at tabling events. But it's certainly not the only mobile-first messaging method out there. Similarly, testing and innovation are absolutely crucial. What worked for our audience and our base might not necessarily work for yours, and vice versa. Not only do you learn valuable lessons by testing out different things and seeing what sticks, you might be really surprised by the results and find an entirely new way to communicate naturally with your audience. And lastly, again, mobile focus does not mean mobile only. We're not trying to only reach voters who have cell phones. We're just trying to close some of the gaps that the pandemic has forced on us and work within the limitations that we have. If you'll go to the next slide for me, Josh. And on that note, we would like to open the floor for any questions. I know we have a couple in the Q&A box that we need to get to. Any questions you all might have on mobile-first messaging and how your organization might fit that framework within existing programs and organizing work.
Thank you, Shatisha. Our first question today is from Bert, who asked, how are you sending data to other apps like Google Sheets, Zapier, other apps you'd recommend?
Absolutely, I'd be happy.
Josh, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, this is Josh. I'd be happy to answer that question. So ManyChat, the platform we're using for our chatbots, ManyChat, and it has a few integrations built in. Google Sheets actually has a direct integration with ManyChat. If you go into the settings, you can attach, actually under the appropriately named integrations tab, you can attach a single Google account there, and all you have to do is log in, and then you're linked up between your Google account and ManyChat. And then you'll just go to make the flow, and under actions, there's an option to take an action with a Google Sheet, and you can like get a row by value, or you can update the Google Sheet, and that's useful for like reading data from the Google Sheet or sending data to the Google Sheet. So that's pretty easy there. There's also a few other integrations built into the actions block there. And I would just encourage kind of looking at those because they tend to change, but Zapier is definitely one of them. And they have a few more options. There's actually an option to like make an external request, which you can do like with APIs. So that, you know, kind of also expands on the possible ways you can integrate with other platforms. Thanks for your question.
Great. I think we have a follow-up question, which was on the ad type we were talking about earlier, Josh. What app was used for the click to call?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. So earlier there was a screenshot that you showed that had a click to call button. And so I think Bert asked a follow-up on what kind of app was used for the click to call function.
Oh, for sure. So that was an example of a flow on Facebook Messenger. There's a few options that Facebook Messenger allows, and one of them is to create a button, and you can have that button basically go to a clickable link. So essentially, it's the same as like tapping a phone number on mobile device. If you've done that, it takes you to the dialer as long as it's like clickable. It's essentially the same thing. So that was something that we can make through ManyChat and deploy through Facebook Messenger for people to click, and then it just sends them to the dialer on their phone.
Great. We have another question. Can you share some examples of ads that got people to engage with the chatbot?
Sure. So firstly, I'll say that the best way to get people to engage with the chatbot is to actually make the content engaging. People tend to engage with us more if we've identified an issue that they care about. So we found success with kind of some of the issue advocacy work. We have just talking about timely things like funding schools or COVID-19 relief. So making the first hook or point of contact something engaging is helpful. Also, I would recommend adding the user's name into communication. So I think you can do that on the second step of communication, like they would have to talk to you first, and then you can send them another message. On that second message, you can use the user's name by just adding a custom parameter into the text box there. So, say, "Hi, John Smith, thanks for talking with us today," or something like that. That can be a really helpful way to kind of personalize it. And really, I think personalizing your chatbot flows makes the users feel more engaged and kind of stay longer in your engagement funnel.
Great. And speaking of that engagement funnel, we have a question. Once a person has begun a conversation, can you re-engage them later? And can you do so in a segmented way? So if they've responded yes, let's say in the flow to a particular action in the past, that they get a message, but if they haven't, they don't. Like, is there a way to sort of separate those flows based on their interactions?
Absolutely. So firstly, Facebook has some rules about re-engaging with people later. They have a one-time request that's like a 24-hour rule. So basically, once a user has started a communication with you, you have 24 hours from that point to talk with them. And after that 24 hours is up, you can't send them a follow-up message anymore. So one of the things that you should integrate into your flow, if you want to follow up with them later, is a one-time message request. Essentially, you're getting them to opt in to receiving one message from you at a later time. And that's an actual thing that's like, you can add that to the flow, like it's its own block. It can't be combined with anything else. And it says like, get started at the beginning. And that's like mandatory. That's what Facebook builds in there. So you have to get them to opt in to communicate with you later. And as far as segmenting your audience, there's a number of ways to do that. One of the ways is you can just add like tags. You can tag them with, like, say, they said yes on your Fund the Schools petition. You set a tag as soon as they take that action, and it's literally called tags in the flow. And that tag is saved to their like user profile within, say, ManyChat, if you're using ManyChat. And you can send communications to only people who have that tag, or on the flow level, what you can do is you can set up a kind of like a logic parameter where it checks to see if they have that tag, that sign the school petition tag. And if they do, then they get like a different line of communication versus if they didn't. So there's definitely a lot of creative ways to individualize conversation and segment your audience.
Great. We have a question from Bishop. Is a mobile-first campaign an affordable option for smaller organizations or campaigns with limited budgets?
I would say it definitely is. It kind of gives you like the wider audience, and some people may not have broadband, but they may have decent internet access on their mobile device. So that's an affordable way for the user to engage with you. And as far as on your end, as the one running the program, you can deploy chatbots, for example, in a few ways that don't like directly cost you any money. Like you can embed them on your website that you're already using or on different landing pages. You can build them into your Facebook page. So, the first message that pops up as soon as the user visits is one that'll start a chatbot conversation. You can also initiate a conversation with the chatbot just by a link, like I mentioned. So, anywhere you can embed a link either into a button or a QR code or just have a link like you see on the screen here, anywhere you can put that for free, that's a way you can start a conversation. So there's a few ways that you can get this conversation going without any investment.
And mobile first also includes organically engaging with your audience on social media websites or apps, I should say. So having a robust presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That's also a really good way to be able to do mobile first messaging, because when people are on their phones, they're mostly on those apps, just sort of looking for content to engage with. And so that's sort of where the organic mobile first messaging can come into play, making sure you're developing, again, graphics that fit people's mobile screens, making sure it's a file type that works with the mobile version of the app. So there are definitely organic ways to be able to do that without necessarily having a budget.
Awesome. Great. And we have a really timely question from Josh about the recent changes that Facebook has made in terms of the policy around news organizations being able to run political ads. And so wondering if that affects C4 and PAC organizations.
Sure. So unfortunately, like you mentioned, that's fairly new, and it's kind of a bar that Facebook kind of keeps changing. They've changed it a few times this year. So I don't know if I have a great direct answer for you on that one, but I do know we're looking into that as well.
Great. So we have a question for folks who are looking to get started with a program like this. So have you seen organizations who don't have a lot of tech mastery or capacity set up chatbots and use them successfully?
Definitely seen small organizations use them effectively. And the reason is, they're really good at kind of being that first line of communication, and organizations with small staffs have used them to contact, their contact list, or engage with their contact list, well beyond their personal capacity to sit there, at a computer or on the phone and text or email or, type to people on Facebook. So I've definitely seen small organizations use them to great effect. I think they're really effective with organizations like that when they, again, have some kind of notification that's sent to the limited staff that they do have, when it's appropriate to talk to a human. And like we mentioned earlier, there are some, ways to deploy them without relying on a big budget. So they definitely have been effective for small organizations. And we for Future Ohio don't have a very large staff, so we've also, just speaking about us, we've used them effectively as well.
And I'll also add on to that. So we specifically use a program called ManyChat that has a lot of really useful tutorials and a really responsive help center built into it. And I know for me personally, that's been a great resource and has been incredibly helpful with getting started with all of this. So if there's an organization that isn't necessarily tech-minded, I would just say start watching those tutorials, and as you have questions, reach out to the help staff with whatever chatbot program you're running with, because they'll help you figure it out for sure.
And many of those programs like ManyChat, like we use, also have a free trial or a free version that you can use and play around with. So you can kind of go through that education period without any investment. So that's a good option.
Great. And so we've obviously talked a bit about some of the paid activity. A question more on some of the organic content side. An attendee asks, I know you can run a Facebook ad that pushes people to chat, but can you do a Facebook post that prompts people to chat with you that's not an ad?
You could accomplish that by adding a link to the copy that takes people to the Facebook Messenger flow. You'll probably want to like at least direct them and give them some kind of instruction, but you can do it that way. You can also add a link to your post like you would like a news article or whatever, or to like a web page, and make an actual landing page. It's possible to make a landing page. It's not like overly special or complicated in ManyChat, but there is a way to do that through ManyChat if you don't have your own landing page. And what you can do is when people click that picture or link, it'll just go ahead and take them to the Facebook Messenger if they're on Facebook already, or if it needs to be a link for some reason to a web page, it'll start the Facebook Messenger conversation there. So there's actually two different ways I can think of to do that through regular post and not like paid ads or anything.
And another thing that you can do, and Josh, I think you touched on this earlier, is you can set up like a welcome messenger flow for your Facebook page. So when people click on that page, a little messenger window will pop up in the bottom corner with like, you know, whatever flow that you want it to say. And if people engage with it, then you can start the flow through that. So that's just another way that you can get that flow in front of people without having to have a budget behind it, which I definitely recommend.
Thanks for your question. Are there any more questions?
And if you don't have any more questions, do you possibly have like experience incorporating mobile first messaging into your work? If you do, please feel free to share that.
All right, so we have a question from Tim. Is that welcome message set up in ManyChat or in Facebook?
So you have to set it up through Facebook, and you actually have to set up your Facebook page, like your business page, to be a certain type of page, because it doesn't show up as an option on all types of pages. So there are a few helpful guides online about which page type to pick, but it is set up through the Facebook level. And then you'll obviously have to make the flow through ManyChat and make sure to connect them. But on the front end, those options are available through Facebook only.
Great. And then we have another question for, I think, folks who are thinking about getting started here. So how well do tech vendors of these tools do in terms of training people and how to use them and run effective programs?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
So how well do tech vendors of these tools like ManyChat, for example, do in terms of training people in terms of how to use them?
I would say they do pretty well. ManyChat by itself has a number of like really nice video tutorials that are really, really instructive and like not really hard to follow. And they make those available pretty much everywhere. In fact, they're on the main page. There's usually like 3 different boxes, like at the very top of the page, showing you about case studies where people have, you know, deployed different types of messenger flows or ManyChat flows, and also at the bottom of those like little boxes, there's also like get started, like how do I actually build this flow? So they give you the example, a case study of, you know, who used it, and some guides on how to actually do it yourself. In addition to that, they've also partnered with some different influencers on YouTube. So there are a number of like really great creators on YouTube that have worked very closely with ManyChat to provide like guides on like really, really kind of cutting edge stuff. And I've personally found them helpful in like teaching myself a lot of these things and like really like digging in and making like, you know, unique and useful useful different types of chatbots, as well as, giving timely information on like different changes, because, like we've mentioned, Facebook tends to change their platform fairly frequently. So there's always like a new, way to do something, whether like you want to or not. So it's definitely great to kind of keep up on that through the training guides they offer.
Awesome. That's great. So we have a kind of a nitty-gritty question from Anna about metrics. So what metrics are you using to assess your Messenger chatbot ads, and what kind of pricing is working? Do you know how much you're spending per conversation or conversion on recent Messenger ads?
So for the examples we gave in the slides here, just as a statistic, we ended up spending about twice as much getting that single desktop conversation started as we did on mobile. As far as statistics are concerned, we tend to track those on the back end through Facebook ads. Like we track kind of like how much it costs to actually start that engagement with the user, and compare that with our spend, and kind of see like, okay, per conversation, how much did it cost to actually get that conversation started? And what we found is it essentially costs about twice as much to do it on desktop as it does on mobile. So the Facebook statistics on the back end have been really informative for us there. And also, speaking of integrations, we use different integrations like Every Action or the Google Sheets, like we see in the slides here, that we also track our engagement on. So we use a number of different things to kind of see where our users are going, what they did, and kind of how much it cost.
Great. And as a follow-up on that, we had a question comment from John about just for as organizations are approaching new tools, kind of thinking through ROI, and he notes that they've been having trouble getting good ROI from ManyChat specifically, and they found better results pushing people to traditional landing pages. So when you're thinking about a campaign, are there some tactics that you found that have been successful, and then how do you sort of think about using this channel versus other channels?
So kind of comparing channels, we've also recently run a Facebook lead ad campaign. And I'll just say that the lead ad campaign, like offering people like a lead form, like a lead generation form where they give us their contact information and so on, actually did yield better results on just like acquiring contact information and leads. So I would say that chatbots excel more in like having conversations. So if you wanted like that front layer of communication, like that, let's just say like lead generation layer there, maybe just like an actual lead acquisition ad through Facebook might be preferable. And then following up on like that really large list you're building with a chatbot to actually give more like individualized communication with those people is probably better. So maybe using traditional lead generation tactics first, and then automating conversations with those people and turning them into warm leads later with the chatbot might be preferable.
Awesome. Well, if there are no further questions and no one has any other comments they'd like to drop in, I just want to thank everyone once again for taking time out of your Saturday schedule to join our session. If you have any further questions or would like to get in contact with either of us to discuss mobile first messaging and how your organization might be able to use that, please feel free to reach out on the contact details on the screen. And you can also get in contact. Oh, were you saying something, Josh?
Yeah, give me just a moment. I think I can fix the screen here. Sorry about that, everyone. Just want to make sure we're actually showing our contact information here. That's the right one there.
There we go.
So here we go.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you guys would like to reach out to us on any of our socials or our email, we also have all of For Our Future Ohio's social media on there as well. So if you want to see sort of how we've been engaging in this mobile first messaging, we've got some pretty good examples up on like our Instagram as well as our Facebook. And thank you all once again so much.
Thanks for coming.